Hi, I'm Aryan Mehta. I'm also SimpleFitnessGains on YouTube. You're here to get healthy. We all are. We're going to break this video up into separate stages of food because with all the seemingly expert nutritionists and dietitians out there, it's hard to know what's raw and true and what's burnt and false. Now, just a disclaimer, this is not a video that tells you how much you should eat to build muscle. This is a video that tells you the types of food you should eat to build muscle. So, right off the bat, the best, most prudent subject to address is quality versus quantity of eating. Here's the rule. The type of food you eat has relatively 0% effect on the amount of weight you gain. The amount of food you eat has a 100% of full effect on the amount of weight you gain. What's the difference? I haven't even started explaining yet. Now, to understand why that rule stands, we have to understand math and chemistry. I know, but just bear with me. Now, many of the quantities in chemistry are measured in energy. And as we know, energy can't be destroyed nor can it be created. It can only be transferable. Now, our bodies take in energy in the form of food and they give it off in the form of heat. Our bodies are one big collection of chemistry, so it makes sense that they would follow the rules of chemistry. Considering we measure a lot of the quantities in chemistry in terms of energy, we do the same thing with the body. Just, we don't call it energy. We call it the calorie. Now, we all have a basic resting calorie rate, which explains that if we laid in bed all day and ate zero food, we would still lose weight, even if we weren't exercising at all. This is because maintaining our neural connections, our existing mass, maintaining ionic balance, digesting stuff, and so many other processes that burn so many calories that we can't even feel. Obviously, most of us don't live a completely sedentary lifestyle, or I hope not. But the point I'm trying to make here is that calories in versus calories out dictates the number on the scale. If you burn more than you gain over a longer and longer amount of time, you're going to lose more and more weight. For moderately active, lifts pretty hard, regular lifestyle type person, I'd recommend a caloric surplus of 2 to 350 calories above maintenance to see adequate muscle growth over a prolonged period of bulking time. Now, because this video doesn't really go into the specific quantities of food and how much you should eat to get jacked, I'm going to link a calorie calculator in the description below, which I find really helpful even to this day when I'm going through different cycles. So I recommend checking that out. Now, like I said, if building muscle and putting on mass is mostly about the quantity of food, why are we bothering considering the types of food anyways? Doesn't that contradict what we've been talking about this whole time? Well, while weight change is dependent on the quantity of food, your health is dependent on the quality of food. And there's a huge difference. What's the difference? In case you're still a little bit confused, think of this. Some factors of our health include blood pressure, hormonal balance levels, such as the testosterone to estrogen balance in different genders, cardiovascular efficiency, stomach acidity. Those are all different components of our health. The type of stuff that the doctor would check at our annual visit. This type of stuff is dictated by the quality of the food we eat. And the quality of the food we eat, while it won't really dictate the number on the scale, it will definitely dictate the person in the mirror. Before we get into the science of it, what actually constitutes quality food? Because there's a huge stigma in the fitness world that if the color of the food isn't green and if it didn't come from a label saying organic, then it's not quality. That's not the case at all. And quality food is really not that difficult to come by for most people. So the number one indicator of a generally unhealthy food is a processed food. And while I'm sure that is no surprise, it's really impossible to cut processed foods completely out of our diet if we can cut them out at all. However, what we can cut out are overly processed foods. Look for chemicals with oddly long names or substances you've just never heard of before, and I'll tell you why. Those aren't natural energy sources for the body. When we eat those types of processed foods, our bodies just have to work that much harder to obtain calories and usable energy out of them. While the overall energy expenditure will be negligible for the body, the oxidative stress and the sheer damage that the reactivity of some of the species can cause on organs and organ systems is definitely not negligible. So avoid overly processed foods and make sure to do thorough research on the chemicals you actually consume. Modifications to natural components in food are also a huge criteria and a huge tell of unhealthy food. And these include things like added sugars and trans fats, which I'm sure we consume a lot of daily. The main issue here is that these foods are actually acceptable as ready energy sources to the body, but the modifications kind of remove everything else. So the main problem here is that the body can actually accept these as energy sources, and it does quite readily, but at the expense of a lot of physiological function. I'll give you a pretty simple example. Trans fats, which are modified fats, interfere with the cell membrane, whereas omega-3 fatty acids insert themselves and stabilize the cell membrane. In turn, this makes the body more resistant to potential viruses, bacteria, and other foreign substances from entering into our organ systems. And the last thing to consider in your diet is ratios. And although this may sound like a quantity issue, it can be a quality issue. The body obtains energy from 3 different subclasses of molecules: carbohydrates, which it obtains quick energy from; lipids, which it stores for more long-term, prolonged energy; and proteins, which it doesn't readily use as energy. It can, but this is more for maintenance and structure. If the total net consumption of one subclass is extremely low or extremely high, this is a good chance that your diet is not healthy and the quality is simply not there. Yes, certain macromolecules will be consumed in higher quantities, especially if you're trying to build muscle, but that doesn't mean you can completely skimp out or completely exceed the daily requirements for that specific macromolecule. Remember, no matter how hard you train, muscle building is priority number 10,000 on the body's list of things to do. You need to make sure it gets the nutrients and the right amount of those nutrients to actually facilitate muscle growth. Muscles are made up of macromolecules, and specifically, this won't come as a surprise to anyone, but specifically protein. However, going on a raw carnivore diet and completely cutting out carbs and lipids isn't the best for cell functionality, energy levels, oxidative stress, inflammation, and many other certain circumstances within the body. In fact, that will probably lower the rate at which you can build muscle, since the body just won't have energy to even put anything on, let alone maintain itself. Remember, I say that because, yes, even though your calories may be sufficient by consuming protein, the body's just not ready to use protein as energy as much as it is for structure. It uses carbohydrates and lipids to get the energy needed to maintain itself. So let's consider what I'm saying at a deeper level. By no means am I saying you have to completely limit the typical junk food out of your diet, and you know what that junk food is. However, I won't sugarcoat it. You definitely have to strictly limit it and place some restrictions on yourself. If you're really trying to build quality muscle, functional muscle, athletic muscle, then all this processed fast food should be making up no more than 10% of your diet. And that's just an arbitrary guideline. It can definitely be lower if that makes you feel better. Now, we've already went over what those unhealthy, low-quality foods can look like, so you should have no problem filtering out your food choice. Now let's consider quantity of those food choices. Now, it's no rocket science. There is an ideal ratio, and it can be a little varying from person to person, but this will help you put on muscle and lean weight. Foods that propel your overall macro consumption to about 55% carbs, 30% protein, and 15% fat should be sufficient. Let's take a look why this functionally makes sense. A diet made up of about half carbohydrates makes sense because it's the best and quickest energy source for your body. Natural carbs are very readily converted into usable calories for the body, which just means that it can continue performing the necessary processes for survival throughout the day. Now, 30% protein may confuse some people. Why 30% protein when muscles are made of protein? Well, remember what I've been saying this whole time. There's a limit to how much muscular adaptation your body can actually do daily. In fact, going over a reasonable protein requirement will just add unnecessary stress. The body, first of all, has to maintain all of its systems, and it does use some protein to do that, such as in the brain, maintaining receptor function does require proteins and amino acids. And so does muscle building. However, after all of its basic needs have been met, the body can really only synthesize so many amino acids and convert it to muscle. This is also why recovery and post-workout recovery is so misunderstood, because people think that the body's a machine. But the body knows exactly what it's doing, and it's going to set a limit for how much it adapts in a day, because at some point, it's just going to be energetically inefficient and it's going to exhaust itself. Now, those 15% lipids are really just for long-term energy, insulation, and cell functionality. It's ideal biologically and physiologically. We can't completely eliminate lipids and fats out of our diet. That would actually be counterproductive and lead to lack of immunity, among many other things. Your diet doesn't need to be some ultra-restrictive, all keto, all green, all carnivore, low carb, low fat, no donut on Sundays, no juice on Monday diet, which is simply unrealistic and really harmful in the long run for the body. Ensure you get a solid ratio of macromolecules in. Avoid overly processed foods and excessive chemical consumption. Pay attention to the modifications in your foods, and you should be golden not only for putting on muscle, but making sure that the muscle you put on contributes to your long-term health and longevity. I'd like to give some shout-outs before signing off. If you want gear which will expedite your lifting journey and simply make it more accessible for you to put on muscle or lose fat or whatever you're trying to do, I'm linking adjustable dumbbells in the description below. They're a great cost saver, especially if you A, can't afford a gym, or B, don't want to cycle through getting one pair of dumbbells, getting too strong for them, and wasting money on the next weight. These adjustable dumbbells come with over 15 different selectable weights that you can use for years on end to put on a really solid foundation of muscle. With that said, this is Aryan Mehta with SimpleFitnessGains signing off until next time. Remember to stay cognizant of the content you consume and stay alert for more content in the very near future.